to have my guest today, Amanda. Well, I always call you Amanda Jane Jones in my mind. I don't know if that is how you go in reality, but I am
Yes.
so excited to have you on the podcast because I have been a huge admirer of basically everything that you do for so many years, followed you online for many, many years. And you've got an incredible book coming out. We want to talk about that. I have to take this opportunity as well to learn about you, your story, your journey, because it's a really interesting one. So welcome to the podcast, and I'm really excited to get into a chat with you today.
Oh, thank you for having me. That was the kindest intro ever. I feel the same about you. This is really fun. It's like meeting a friend that you've never met
Yeah.
before.
Exactly. All right. So, like I said, I've got a lot of questions for you, and because you've had such an incredible career so far. I mean, I feel like for you, it's probably only just beginning, and you are, a mum. You do lots of amazing creative work. But where I often like to start with the podcast is to kind of go back to the beginning. So I'm really curious, and this is,
Sure.
about people's sort of, I guess, their journey and who they were sort of before they had to make that decision about, I'm going to go to design school, or I'm going to do this with my career or my life. So can you fill in that chapter of your life in terms of where you grew up, what your childhood was like, just a little glimpse into that? And I guess that up to that point where you're starting to make a decision about what do I want to do, where do I want to go with my life?
Yes, absolutely. So I grew up in Kansas City, and my mom was really good at cultivating the arts. Like, I just created all the time. She had an art closet full of every imaginable little bit and bob that I could use at my disposal. And that was fun for me. I would just sit for hours, and I've done the same for my kids. And so it's fun to see them continue the tradition, I guess. But I started out wanting to be a photographer, and then became an apprentice during the summers and realized just how much socialization there is involved with being a photographer and talking to people, which is really hard for me. I'm just like a homebody. I love being home. And so my mom actually encouraged me to try graphic design, and it's been the perfect fit. And I've just loved it ever since.
So in your book, which we're going to get into, Mother Founder, you talk a little bit about how you were you went to design school, or you went to college, and you were actually one of
Yes.
two people that was not selected as an intern. And I thought, for a
Yes.
start, that is so interesting because obviously you've gone on to have an incredibly successful career. So first of all, how somebody's opinion or judgment of you doesn't always matter. Obviously it's just an opinion. And secondly, how you, I guess, managed to pick yourself up after that. So can you share a little bit about that story? Because I think it's
Oh,
so
sure.
encouraging in a way, that I think people just see like this amazing career and think like, oh, she's had like, everything's gone right for her. And, in the book you share where it hasn't gone right. But can you share a little bit about that
Yeah.
story?
Absolutely. No, the program I was in was very competitive, and I just didn't quite fit the mold that they were trying to produce. Yeah, my professor would tear my work off the wall. He would roll it up in a ball. And back then, the way they did it is they would select different internships for different artists. And then at the end, I didn't have one. And no one explained to me why not. No one explained to me anything. They were just like, have a good day. So I was like devastated. It was something I'd worked so hard for. But I joke all the time that I need to write them a thank you note, because that experience completely changed how I viewed the art world. I learned that no matter what, I'm in charge of my destiny. You know what I mean? And that night, I remember thinking, I'm not going to be left behind. So I sent my portfolio out to probably 50 studios. I only heard back from 3, and then 1 said yes. And then from there, it's just a stepping stone. You only need 1 yes every step of the way. And then everything builds on itself. So I feel like that experience, although hard, it taught me to be a go-getter. It kind of empowered me to just take hold of my future and do things the way I wanted to do it.
I love that. You only need one yes. And that's so true, isn't it? And people don't share or don't hear about the no's. And I mean, every creative, every person out there has had so many no's. And the
Oh my
fact that
gosh,
you
yes.
share that story, I think is so important, because I think, again, people can feel so less than, or that they're not making progress, or, down on themselves, when they get those no's. But I think the more that we know and understand that that is actually just part of the journey, that's just part of the story, the better. So
Exactly. Well, the
yes.
no's, I feel like, have made me who I am. You know what I mean? One of the women in the book, Justina Blakeney, she always describes it as a pivot. I love that. It's not like a failure. It's just an invitation to pivot your direction. And I've kind of adopted that as well.
Okay, so can you now fill us in between you then got your yes and you started
Yeah.
working with one of these design companies, and then what happened between then and when you started working with Kinfolk and got involved with the kind of the creation of that project?
Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated school. I kind of quit going to class, which sounds terrible, but I just realized, it was a losing battle. I just thought, you know what, I just need to figure this out for myself. So I kind of finished the semester, didn't do absolutely wonderful, but then I got an internship and then a job at a design firm. I followed my husband. He was getting his law degree, and there was only one job available in the design field, and I got it. But I was miserable. I was depressed. I wasn't making very much money, and that's when the light went off in my head. I think you could be self-employed. That idea was just like simmering. And so I spent that whole year just hustling on the weekends, hustling in the evenings. So I'd work my design job, learn as much as I could from my employer. And then after a year, I quit. And I'm not going to lie, it was really scary because my husband was just in school. He wasn't making any money. So I was the sole provider. And that first year, I just asked everyone I knew, do you need work? Do you know anyone that needs work? And so I did a lot of things that maybe weren't my dream job, but it was a stepping stone to bigger jobs. And by the second year of being self-employed, I doubled my income. And by the third year, I'd quadrupled it. And it was just so empowering to know that I could kind of make my own destiny and make these choices that crafted my career. So it was a great way to start. And then that led me to Kinfolk. Yeah.
So
So
how did you meet them, or what happened for that magic to happen?
yeah, so Nathan and I had followed each other back in blogging days, Blogger, and he just reached out. It was right about when I was ready to quit my 9-to-5 job. And he just said, hey, I have this magazine. I'm really interested in your work. His designer was pregnant and sick and couldn't do it. So he's like, I need someone to fill in and step in. So I did. And it was just like magic. It's some of those things just happened and everything kind of fell into place. I mean, we made a lot of mistakes, but we were both really poor and young and didn't know what we were doing, which kind of makes you bolder and braver, And so it was a good experience and I learned a lot.
And what would you say, because I think you've got such a distinct aesthetic, how has your aesthetic evolved over the years? Like, what are some of the key influences in it? It's quite a pared back, simple style. Has it, like, do you see elements from maybe your childhood or key mentors along your journey that have really influenced that aesthetic? And how has that evolved over the years? And then I guess, how do you infuse that into different client projects? So then when you're working on something such as Kinfolk, obviously the clients are coming to you with a brief and they're coming to you for a reason, but
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much overlap with styling, interior design, where, you are known for a particular look and feel and people come to you for that, but also they're wanting your take on their project. So how's
Right.
your aesthetic and style evolved?
Oh, so much. Well, and it's funny because when I started Kinfolk, I remember thinking my professors would hate this because I loved simple design. I loved the simplicity, the just doing things outside the norm. And But I think that was where part of our success was, because it ended up looking like nothing else on the market at the time. And I think that was a good lesson in trusting your gut. I think over time, my style has evolved because so many people did come to me for the Kinfolk style that after a while I was like, I need something else. I was ready for a new challenge. And so having kids and starting children's books, I kind of evolved into a more colorful, more fun aesthetic, but I still really enjoy going back to my roots and doing the simple, beautiful styles. I have a,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
So I was going to say, like, would you say there are like certain designers that have influenced you, whether it's graphic designers or, like, where do you think the foundation of your style comes from in that sense?
Well, a lot of my inspiration in the beginning came from, I used to be a collector, I guess I still am, of ephemera, like vintage books. My bookshelves are just full of old books, and I would if I went to the flea market, I'd pick up old pamphlets or old photographs, and I loved that old aesthetic. And then I've always been very inspired. I saw Myra Coleman speak at a conference when I was in college, and her work just moves me. She's not a graphic designer, but she's an illustrator, author, and so much of that is intertwined, and she's actually in the book Mother Founder, but her work has always inspired me. And then I'm very inspired by mid-century artists, Ray Eames, all of that.
Is that to do with, yeah. Is that to do with, because I'm not familiar with Kansas City. Like, is that to do with, or Kansas, where you grew up? Like, is there a bit of a mid-century vibe there in some of the homes? Or do you think it's partly related to that, or your parents and their aesthetic?
I don't think, my mom and I have very different styles. We're very opposite in that way. But I think, yes, I would say Kansas City has kind of a mid-century vibe. It's more industrial. And it's funny, when I left, I was like, get me out of here. But when I go back as an adult, I think, oh, I love this. I think I could see myself living here again. It's a really lovely area and kind of a secret of the US. Not many people know how great Kansas City is.
Well, one of the things that I've loved about following your journey is that you have lived in so many different places. You have lived in Chicago for a long time, which, as somebody who lived in Australia and not knowing a lot about Chicago, it was like, oh, that seems like an interesting place, like in the style of your home. You, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you live in Switzerland or somewhere in Europe for a stint while your husband was studying or doing some work like that? What have been some of the, I guess, like the influences of some of the places that you have lived on your style, your work, and being able to work, I guess, as well?
Oh, so much. I'm really grateful. Being self-employed, I just can follow my husband wherever his internships or schooling or work takes him, and vice versa, because he has this flexible schedule. But yeah, I think being able to live in different places can really shape you as an artist. The tastes and the smells and the colors and the posters, it's just also inspiring. And every time we travel, we try and collect books and little trinkets that we keep around our home so that we're always kind of inspired from our past travels.
Yeah. No, it's always fascinating to watch your journey. Okay, I have to share this. This is a sort of little excerpt from the book because I feel like it sums up so well what this book is about. So let me if you just bear with me for 1 second while I read this out. So
of course,
you say, to quote the great Brené Brown, "It is a terrible myth to believe that once we have children, our journey ends and theirs begins. For many of us, the most interesting and productive times in our lives come after we have children." So that's the quote from Brené. And it says, in fact, the two of us, which is you and your co-author, I'm just finding her name.
Oh, Jennifer Fernandez.
Jennifer Fernandez. Sorry, I have that written down. There's further down.
Yes, totally fine.
So, in fact, the two of us found that our ability to be productive and problem solve in our work increased exponentially after having children. We wanted to spend more time with them and do great work and make good money. So we were smarter and wiser with our time. This is why we feel so deeply passionate about this book and its message. We want to empower mothers to support them and raise them up, because we know they are already equipped with many of the tools necessary for success. We want to reassure them that loving their children doesn't have to mean sacrificing their professional identities. This almost makes me choke. Like, it's just so beautiful.
Me too.
If they don't want to, and that finding meaning in work doesn't have to mean sacrificing their relationships with their children. For whoever needs to hear it, we want to scream from the rooftops, there is room for you. I mean, honestly, like, it just gives me goosebumps reading that. Like, I was not expecting, when I started reading this book, I was not expecting to feel so deeply seen and kind of recognized and acknowledged as somebody who is a mom who loves my children, but also really loves the work that I do, and also needs to work, like, it's those kind of, I guess, like, those three things. Like, it's, because I mean, you can be, passionate about something, but it's like, oh, this is a hobby and this is nice and so on. But, I support my family essentially. And
yes,
my husband works in my business, and you talk about in the book that, I don't know if this is still your story, but you've had many seasons where you have been the person supporting your family. And I think this is why I have always deeply resonated with you and what you do and how you show up and the work that you do and who you are, because you can follow somebody on Instagram and you can think, oh, isn't that fun, they're doing this cute craft project with kids, and you can enjoy it and you can appreciate it. But when I see someone who's doing those things and working, and and I think one of the things that I also really admire about this book is of how honest you are about your values and what's really important to you. And I know that you have, over the years, created so many posters in relation to causes that you're really passionate about, or projects or whatever, and how you really stand up for yourself in that way. I really admire. So I think that this book is such a beautiful encouragement for anyone who is a mother and working, to see that you're not alone. And I think that, we can feel connected to people online, and we can watch people on Instagram and see that they're people, but we can still feel sometimes quite alone on our journey. And I think that the encouragement of this book is that you're not alone. And for me, like I said, I mean, even just reading that little extract, it really touches me so, so deeply, because, I think that, it seems to often be sort of divvied up into different, like, you're a mom, or, you're a career woman or whatever, but not that, like, how can you hold space for both things? So what compelled you to create this book? Was that something that you were feeling deep within you?
Yes. So I actually grew up in, which, first of all, thank you for those kind words. That just means so much that it touched you. And that's our goal, is, to reach the women that need to hear it. But yeah, I was raised in a conservative community where major messaging was women belonged in the home. It's really important that you find a husband and start a family, and maybe use your education if you need a backup plan. And in the back of my mind, even as a child, I was like, this doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel good for me. And I feel like often in the world, especially today, a lot of people have opinions on what a woman should be, what she should be doing, what she should be saying. And a lot of times people think that women should either be mothers or working, and that it's an all or nothing situation. And really, it's not. A woman can have so many identities. Being a mother is one of the greatest joys of my life, but it's not my only joy. And I find immense gratification and fulfillment from my work, just like I find fulfillment from being a mother with my children. And I'm lucky that I found a spouse who also supports my dreams and my art, and I support his. And I've never been asked to give up my dreams, but I've been talking to women that have been asked to give up their dreams to stay at home, and it breaks my heart. I feel like the idea that a mother that works is lesser than is heartbreaking. I feel like The time and effort I put into my family is just as valuable as the time and effort I put into myself and my growth as a human being, you know. When I first had my daughter, my husband was working 12 hours a day. I was drowning, he was drowning, and we just both looked at each other and we're like, we've got to figure something out so that it's more of a partnership. And yeah, it's been a really wonderful thing to grow together as a team and share the load of parenthood and kind of get rid of the gender roles and the stereotypes and find our own way that works for our family.
Is this a book or an idea that you've had on your heart for a long time and it finally found that you had a time to do it? Or was there like, I know in the book, you know, your co-author sort of shares a story about that she interviewed you for a magazine and, you know, you then contacted her. So did that kind of go, oh, this is now the right time to do this? How did that, you know, was it a bubbling away for a long time?
Yes. So I'd been working on it, kind of concepting it with my agent, who's amazing. Her name's Kate Woodrow. And she had been like, we'd go back and forth about ideas and how this would work. And she said, you know, you might, because writing isn't I like to write, but it doesn't come as naturally to me. And she said, you might consider a ghostwriter. But then I had my interview with Jen, and she was so lovely. And I'm sure you have experience with this. When you meet someone, you just click and you feel like, oh, I really like you. And so then the next, I don't know, maybe it was a couple weeks after, I wrote to her and I was like, this is so crazy, so out of the blue, but would you ever consider co-authoring a book? And I like explained what my idea was, and I shared with her the mock interviews I'd done and the design. And she immediately was like, yes, I've been waiting for a project like this. Like, it still gives me goosebumps. It just felt like the universe was bringing us together. And we've been really lucky because we worked really well together. We both have similar temperaments. It was just, I mean, it was a hard process, but working together was very easy. And I'm really grateful we found each other. But it's been a long journey. We've been working on this for 3 years now.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, you actually, the book starts with sharing, I think it's Jen sort of shares something like about this idea of rejection, that you faced 10 no's with this book before you ended up ultimately sign a deal. So that kind of so back to what we started this conversation about, which is this idea of how often we have to hear and almost embrace the no's. Like the more that we can go, come on, give me more no's because I know I'm getting closer to a yes.
Yes, exactly. Well, and it's interesting because most of the no's came from publishers that were run by men. They would say things like, I don't think this is a necessary topic. But the publishers run by primarily females were like, they understood our vision and they said yes. So amazing. I'm glad we found our fit with Artisan. They've been a wonderful company to work with.
And so the book is predominantly a series of interviews with a range of women across a bunch of different fields from, I mean, you've mentioned, you know, interior designer Justina Blakeney, the Sarah Sherman Samuel. You've got people like Joy or Joy Chan, is it?
Joy Cho, yes.
Joy Cho from Joy. So, and yeah, a whole heap of, you know, like people who are nutritionists and, you know, a range of different fields. But that was all their stories were really inspiring and interesting to read and hear, and very much it's not just like the glossy side of motherhood. You know, the questions and the interviews really get into the challenges of, you know, when people have had to, you know, have moments where they sort of think, this is not working for me in my business. You know, I'm having to breastfeed and go straight onto, you know, this meeting or this thing, or, you know, and the challenges of juggling, you know, motherhood and business. And so, you know, it really is, you know, pulling back the curtain on the challenges of doing that, but it is also reassuring, and people share as well their you know, their big lessons and advice. But what I also really loved was that you intersperse throughout the book your sort of some of your big, you know, takeaways or lessons or experiences. And I wanted to well, first of all, before I go into some of those, what surprised you about some of the answers as you were reading through them? Were there some things that you really surprised you about the answers, or didn't surprise you and you're like, oh, it's incredible how we're going through the same thing?
Yeah, I think it was more that a big theme was that many of the women, being self-employed obviously isn't the easiest choice in a lot of ways. But when asked if they would pivot or go back to a firm, most of them said no, because the amount of autonomy and flexibility they have, I think it comes down to time. They're in control of their own time, and for them that is empowering. And it's not about the money always, but the time, and that they get to choose how they spend it. I think choice is a very big theme in this book. I think when women have more choices, the more freedom they have, and the more power they feel in their own life. And yeah, I found like I feel like that, but then it was validating to hear all the other women feel similarly.
Yeah, because I mean, it's 68 interviews, like sort of a big cross section of women from different industries. So it's really interesting to hear and, read and learn about, like, oh, yes, this is a pattern. Like, this is not just, one person's experience, but this is the experience of many women. So, I think that's important.
Well, and we tried really, really hard. We were very thoughtful about who we invited, because we have women that have Harvard degrees. We have women that are self-taught. We have women that started their companies before having children, women that started after their children were grown. We have single moms, divorced moms, stepmoms. We have women that, are in Forbes, and women that lost their jobs during COVID and had to make ends meet. There's just a very, very vast variety of women and circumstances and backgrounds that our hope is that anyone who picks up the book would see themselves reflected in some way on the pages, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, before these women were briefed, did you, the questions, did you say, look, we really want you to be honest and really share, the challenge of motherhood? Because, sometimes I think it can be very easy interviews for people to say like, oh yeah, a little bit hard, but, now everything's rosy, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Was that part of the brief for the book, that people really needed to be honest?
Absolutely. Yeah. We were like, tell us the hard stuff along with the good stuff. Because that's the only way it will be helpful to anyone. That's the only way you grow, is when you go through the hard things, then come the good things, I feel like in every sense of life.
Yeah, completely. Okay. I wanted to ask you to just share a little about some of the topics you discuss in the book. So one of the big ones, and you shared this a little bit more towards the end, which is this idea of women not talking about money. And I think this is huge.
Yes.
I think that, as well, in general, in society and culture, we don't talk about money, obviously specifically women. And what's your take on that? Why do you think we need to talk more about money?
Oh, well, I quote, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right. Maybe I have it right here. But it's Victoria Woodhull. She was the first female stockbroker in America. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. And she says, women's ability to earn money is better protection against the tyranny and brutality of men than her ability to vote. And I also quote Tori Dunlap, the financial feminist, who I adore her book. And she says, having money means having options. And I was raised that talking about money wasn't ladylike. But the problem with that is that when you don't openly talk about money, that's where we get gender gaps. That's where we get women who are working for much smaller pay. And I give this example sometimes. One time, a family member asked me flat out, well, how much do you make? And so I shared, and I was like, why? How much do you make? And then they said, oh, we don't talk about those kind of things, like shaming me for engaging. You know what I mean? And I I've just learned that you can't live that way. And one of the best things I've done in my career is recently I have a women's group. We call ourselves Art Club, but we get together, we make things, but it's a safe place for us to talk contracts, to talk resources. Like the other day, one of the women in the group got a request by someone famous to do an invitation. She's like, tell me how much I should charge. You know what I mean? It's a very safe place for us to make sure that we're all hitting a higher standard than maybe we would have, held for ourselves. And for me, the ability to be financially independent is huge. I feel safety in knowing that I can be financially independent. And again, it comes down to the choices and feeling empowered. I feel like it makes me feel in charge of my future in a way. And I just want more women to feel like that.
Yeah. And I think that, the more that, going back to Brené Brown, like the more that we remove the shame about talking about money, like it's like when you talk about the thing, shame can't live in the space where you kind of talk about it, the better that we're all off. And like you say, that's, I think, a huge part of the inequality in pay between men and women, when I look at it in all industries. I mean, my daughter is obsessed with soccer at the moment, and, it's just crazy, the inequality between, women's sport and men's sport. And, I was listening to an interview with American soccer player actually, and she was talking about how, for so long the rhetoric was like, well, you should just be grateful that you can play, it doesn't matter, like stuff like that, which is like this whole other thing. But it's, it's so across so many different industries. So yeah, I think the more that we talk about money, the better. And if you're not in some kind of community or space, such as you say, I think try and find yourself in a place where you can ask questions, where you can, be around your peers that are doing the same kind of things as you, because I think it's so important.
You need to have a sounding board.
Yeah. Which kind of leads us into contract, and you share some of your experiences with not having had contracts. And I have a group coaching design grow, and was actually just talking to somebody yesterday who's working with big international brands. She's an interior designer and does big projects for them. And, she's just kind of got her contracts like ironclad, because, it's like when we're dealing with these big companies, we kind of go, oh, like we're so grateful in many ways to have that kind of work. But then like we don't stand up for ourselves, and a contract is the legal way we can do that. So can you just share a little bit about, or maybe one of those stories where you didn't have a contract and how you got burnt?
Oh, yes. I mean, yes. So I was working with a company and we moved forward without a contract, and I was making an 8% royalty for them to use my art. And all of a sudden they came to me at like January something, and I was just preparing for my maternity leave with my second. And they said, we're really sorry. We had some errors in our accounting and we overpaid you. But there was no documentation or anything. But they said, we overpaid you by $4,000. And I was preparing for maternity leave. I could not pay that back. Like, my husband was in school. I was like, is there something we can work out? Do you want me to take it out of royalties? And they said, yes, but we're going to move your royalty down to 1%. And I was mortified, embarrassed to be treated like that. But frankly, I mean, I say all the time, it was my fault. I should have, enforced a contract, because if I'd had a contract, that would have never happened. And the funny thing is, after that happened, I still did not enforce a contract, and it happened again the following year. And so then after that, I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm out, but that was such a huge learning experience. You have to have a contract, even if it's a friend, even if it's a family member. Like, even the tighter your contract is, the better it will go. You know what I mean? When there's no wiggle room, there's no questions, you can always refer back. Well, the contract says this, and then you move forward, no drama. So yeah, I always talk about having a good contract. And I'm grateful I married a lawyer, because he actually studies contracts. So that works in my benefit. But finding a great lawyer is priceless.
And so does he create your contracts now, or do you go through a sort of an external service?
Yeah, no, he goes through all my contracts, which is so kind. And actually, funny enough, he's like my biggest advocate, but sometimes I have lost jobs because they're like, this is too much. Like he just goes through every detail and they're like, I'm sorry, we can't do this. It's too much. But then in those instances, I think, well, I'm probably better off, if they weren't willing to make those adjustments.
So can you share, because I did find this really interesting, because I've worked alongside a lot of designers, graphic designers over the years on my own books, my own projects. And I do think it's really interesting that you have created this revenue stream through doing, I guess, licensing deals. Is that what you would call it? Whereby you have designed a product for a company and, like you say, you get a percentage of royalties. So is that something that, like, when did you start doing that? Has that been a good source of income for you? And what are some of the lessons that you've learned through doing that? Because we do get many designers listening to this podcast and, within the creative industries. And I just think it was a really interesting pathway that you've gone down.
Yeah. So when I started out my career, I was solely doing graphic design work, books, logos, that type of stuff. And then the opportunity came to start doing collaborations. And I actually loved it so much because for me, it was a wonderful way to get some supplemental income. You design once and then you get monthly payments. And I mean, as a mom who has less time, that's fantastic. And I also found that when I do collaborations, it's a wonderful way to introduce your work to new audiences and to, piggyback off of other people's social media followers. For me, I don't license as much, but I do, just because a lot of people want to use my name, like collaboration with Amanda Jane Jones. So I'll usually charge a design fee and then also royalties from the product. So that's been great for me.
Yeah. And how much do you think it's been key having your own personal brand? You touched on that you used to do blogging. Obviously, you've got quite a strong presence on social media. A lot of designers don't necessarily do that. Do you think that that is something that people should really consider in terms of, if they want to certainly go down that path, but building up their business, getting clients? How key has been having a personal brand to getting more work and collaborations?
In my experience, it's the only experience I've had. It's worked really well for me. The only downfall is if something doesn't go quite like you envisioned, then it's like, it feels a little funny to have your name on something you don't love, but then you learn from that experience and move on and try to be more picky. But yeah, it's been wonderful for me in my career. And it's also been fun to like broaden my portfolio, working with different companies and learning how they work. Everything is a learning experience,
Yeah. I did want to ask you about Instagram, social media, because I feel like you do navigate it so well. You sort of have this beautiful line, though, of, I feel that whatever you do is always in integrity, and it's always, it's kind of like sometimes you do your outfits and they're always really cute, and they're kind of like, you create like little reels, and they're fun and they're playful, and they never feel either cheesy or like, pushy, or I don't know, like you always kind of get this really, really nice balance between, obviously, still showing up, still creating content, and still kind of doing, in a way, like what the algorithm wants. Like, you are creating reels, which a lot of people, like, I'm not going to create reels, and this whole thing about it. But you do it in a way that is authentic to you. What is your take on social media, and what are like some of, I guess, the red flags that you have in your own mind in terms of what you will do or you won't do, or how you want to show up? Like, what's your frame on that? What's your filter in terms of how you use social media?
Oh gosh, that's a big question. And to be honest, it's ever evolving. Like some days I'm like, I'm done. I'm quitting. um, and in the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes. Um, I shared my kids a lot more than I wish I would have, especially now with AI and stuff. I don't do that anymore. And and I'm much more picky about the brands that I work with. The first ever, I've shared this before, but the first ever sponsored post I got, it was in that first year of my daughter being born. We were so poor. My husband was in school, and McDonald's reached out to me to do a sponsored post. And it was about like, those, they were putting cuties in the Happy Meals. And I was like, sure, I can do that for that amount of money. Like I was so excited to make this big chunk of change. And it was for 3 posts. And I did one post, and it was just like, oh, I got called names. I was called a Satan follower. I was like so mean. But honestly, it was good for me because I was like, I don't even eat at McDonald's. So why? I was just desperate for more income and an easy way to support my family. But it was a good learning experience that, who you sign up with, that really could impact your brand, your business. And so I've learned a lot better to partner with brands that I align with their values and have a similar aesthetic and that I actually use. So I don't know. It's hard. The reels are hard, but I'm just trying to go with the flow. Who knows what the next change will be? It's ever changing. And so I try not to get comfortable doing one thing and just figuring out as I go.
And so how much do you plan your feed in advance? And how much, like, what are some of the, I guess, the things that you've worked out that work for you in terms of creating content and that side of it?
Some months I'm really great at it, and some months I'm not. A lot of it has to do, I plan around books that I have coming out, projects that I have coming out. So that's a nice, like, built-in schedule. But otherwise, it's just kind of, I don't have a rhyme or reason, to be honest. Maybe I should. Maybe I'd have more success on Instagram if I thought about it more. Or maybe not. I don't know. The algorithm seems so mysterious to me because I don't know what's going to do well and what doesn't. But
Yeah,
you just kind of figure it out as you go.
Yeah. And like I say, I mean, I think that you've sort of certainly found the kind of a sweet spot in a way of showing up in a way that seems, in alignment with who you are, what you stand for. And,
Oh, thank
you're
you.
still showing up, you're still consistent, which I think is a huge part of, the process. And, that can lead to kind of your success in inverted commas, in terms of like people still reaching people, still connecting with people who are in your community, which I think, is kind of what it comes down to. But yeah, it's I always enjoy it anyway. Whenever I see one of your posts, it's like there's always something to enjoy. So so I did want to ask you, and you touch on this in the book as well, about supporting your family. And it kind of, it's aligned to this idea of what we've just spoken about with Instagram, which is, doing things that are in integrity and, authentic to you. Because you have had seasons, and I'm not sure which season you're in currently right now, but you've definitely had seasons where you've shared it on social media as well. And you talk about it in this book of, you are the one who's supporting your family while your husband is studying, he's still at school. When you have been in those seasons, and obviously, like you say, you had that instance with, a big corporation, and you went, okay, we need the money. I'm just going to go for this work. But I do always feel, though, that you do seem to get kind of this good balance of still bringing enough money, but working on projects that you love. Do you think that comes down to experience, or what has been key for you to still being able to, make enough money, but also work on the projects that you really love?
Oh, yeah. I love talking about this actually, because my husband only got his first job when we moved here. And it's funny because everyone says, tell me what your husband does when we meet new people, not realizing he just started working. Anyway, it just cracks us up. But yeah, so what I do is I like to keep a list of personal projects that I want to do that like pull at me when I'm daydreaming. And you know how work comes, well, for me it does, it ebbs and flows. When it rains, it pours. And so then when I'm in a low spot with work, instead of being like, oh no, there's no more work, that's when I look at my list and think, what personal project do I want to work on? So usually that comes around children's books, murals I do, collaborations. That's when I take that time to be like, okay, what company do I want to work with? What could I pitch to them? And then from those lulls in my design work come these other exciting opportunities. So I just try to not focus on the slow parts of my career and just always look at it as an opportunity to do something new.
Yeah, I love that. And so give us some tips on pitching to companies and give some examples
sure.
of some of the collaborations that you have done. So what has that looked like? Is it you have designed, a product range? Is it like what actually is, the collaboration, which is such a broad term. It can mean so many things to so many different people. So can you give us some tips on, well, first of all, let us know what it looks like for you today, and then what are some tips to pitch?
Yeah, I'd say in the beginning, people were reaching out to me to do collaborations because I'd never done any. And so then working with those companies, I started realizing, oh, I can pitch to other companies. So what I do is I'll mock up a product or a print and I'll actually put it on their product and kind of brand it, give an example of what it could look like, how we could market it. I'll kind of do a whole presentation. And people say no, but a lot of people say yes. I think what's exciting about those is that a lot of companies are looking for artists to work with, looking for new ideas, but maybe are just waiting for you to ask, So that's been fun. Like, I love working with Schoolhouse Electric. They're so fun. And I just did a collaboration last year with Opinel, the knife company. That was so fun. I just love collaborations. I think it's a great way to meet new people and try new things and see your work in different mediums. I love it.
So this kind of ties back to, I guess, that contract idea. So if you're creating a pitch and you're doing work ahead of, you're submitting an idea to them, how do you then know that, A, they're not just going to take that idea and run with it and not involve you? So there's that side of things. And then how do you also find the right person to pitch to? Because it's like with books, isn't it? Like, you've got to find the right person to speak to, otherwise it just goes on a slush pile.
Yes, exactly. I mean, it's a gamble. My work's been copied before. I think probably every artist has been copied before. One thing that I always do is I put, copyright Amanda Jane Jones on every presentation. If someone comes to me to pitch an idea to them, I have learned to have them pay for my time to pitch. And then we work out a contract after so that helps, because I've been asked to pitch things and then they don't pick it and you feel like, oh, it's a waste of time. And then when I pitch, it's usually just like fingers crossed, but I've never had anyone steal an idea when I pitch, but I have heard of that happening. So yeah, I think it's just a leap of faith,
Yeah.
And
I've tips.
Oh yeah, sorry.
No, but they're good tips. I love that. Yeah, putting the right. You could probably even put a watermark or something on your designs, or to sort of all those little things definitely help. So sorry, I interrupt you, and I had another question in my head, and now it's gone.
But sorry.
No, that's fine. So like I said, so you talked about so some of the things from the book was women not talking about money. So we've talked about contracts, supporting your family, community we've touched on. So there was one other one, which was boundaries. And I think that this is, it's boundaries with clients, boundaries with yourself. So what are some of the big lessons that you've learned about boundaries?
Oh gosh, I have learned so much. I was raised to be a people pleaser. And in the beginning of my career, that was such a hindrance. that looked like me waking up at 4 a.m. to work till my daughter woke up, and then like not sleeping. I wasn't exercising. I was trying so much to do so much for everyone else and forgot about myself. And I've just learned that I have to set boundaries in order to be a healthier mother, a healthier person, a more productive person. Even in my work, like I used to give all my clients my phone number, which was just so awful, because you'd be at the park with with your kids, and then they're texting you, "Hey, I need this turned around in an hour." And then, I'd run home and try and fix it with the kids. And I can't do that anymore. So now I'm very strict. I don't give anyone my phone number. And I have very set work hours. And if I get an email outside of those work hours, you don't get a response. I'm sorry, which I'm sure has lost me some clients. But in the end, it's better for my mental health. And I do feel like working relationships perform better when there are boundaries in place, because then you come to the meeting, prepare the email more organized, and work is then presented so much more efficiently when everyone's aware of the parameters of the project.
Yeah. And it's about respect, isn't it? Like them respecting your time, your, contribution. And I think there's like a bit of a power play as well that happens in those situations as well. And so when you push back on that, I think that actually benefits you. I've now remembered my question, which was curious to ask, because we were talking about, some of your personal projects, and you mentioned about children's books, and you've done several children's books now. Are they purely passion projects, or can you make money from children's books? Because I'm curious, because I've done
absolutely.
I've done obviously interior books, and I'm very familiar with that world, but I'm just curious because you have done several children's books, and are they a sort of a genuine revenue stream in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't live on children's books alone, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you first start out and you're a new author, they're kind of like, well, you have nothing to show. So, but then as you show your success, you can, and a huge part of my success is my book agent, who I mentioned, Kate Woodrow. She's like, maybe she'll say, "What do you expect to get for this?" And I'll say a number, and she'll get me double what I'm expecting. You know what I mean? She's fantastic. She worked at Chronicle Books, so she knows the industry. And I think it's really important to have someone like that on your team, because they handle the contracts, they handle going to bat for you, and they ask the hard questions that I don't want to ask. And then I can just make beautiful books, which is my favorite part,
So what would you say, like if you were to kind of divvy up the different revenue streams in your business, like what percentage roughly comes from just purely freelance work? What percentage comes from, say, collaborations, say maybe book royalties? Like, I don't know what other revenue streams that you have, but roughly what would you say?
I'd say graphic design is still a hefty portion. Books have now become another hefty portion. I don't know. It's hard. I've never actually mapped it out, so I should. That would be interesting. I also have been doing a lot more Instagram ads, which, love it or leave it. They are great because it's a quicker source of income. But yeah, I'd say that graphic design work is like my bread and butter that sustains me through the year. And then books would be like the second biggest thing. And then the occasional Instagram ad, collaboration. Collaborations don't always, there are some that make a ton of money and some that don't, like working with smaller brands don't always make a lot of money. But oftentimes I'll choose to work with those just because I want a beautiful, like, have you seen my chess set? Possibly.
No, I'll have to check that out.
Well, I do that with a local company, and they're handmade, super intricate, expensive to make. So neither of us make a ton of money on them, but they're just so beautiful. We don't care. You know what I mean? Oh, I just complimented myself, but you know what I mean? Like, I love having a handcrafted thing I designed. And to me, that's more important than making a whole bunch of money on it.
Yeah.
So
no,
you kind of pick your battles and choose your wins.
Yeah. So give us a bit of an insight into like a typical week or a typical day, for you in terms of, obviously it sounds like it's very project based, but give us a rough
Yes.
sense of like how you manage your time, your days, what kind of hours are you working on your projects
Sure. Yeah.
and your business?
Well, I have learned I am most productive when I start my day with exercise. And I just like, I'm embarrassed. I almost can't function without it. And I'm pregnant right now. I'm 29 weeks and it's almost elevated. Like if I don't exercise, just my whole day's gone. So I always start with exercise. And then my youngest is in school. And so I work every morning, and then my husband and I trade off. So I work Monday and Wednesday afternoons. He works Tuesday, Thursdays, and then Friday is kind of like our flex day. We'll be like, I have a project due. Can I take it? I have a presentation. Can I take it? So we kind of just map out our week that way. And it works great for us. I realize that might not work for everyone else, but hey, it works for our family and we feel great about it.
Yep. And so you've mentioned, previously you would get up, very early in the morning to work on projects, maybe working
Yes.
late. So are you really good now at enforcing boundaries around, working within work hours? And
Yeah.
how does that look? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, there are some days when I have a deadline and I have to work late, but generally speaking, now I just work during my allotted hours. I really don't work on the weekends. That's my time to be with my family. And yeah, the key for me though is I let people know ahead of time. I don't work 40 hours a week. It's usually 20, 25-ish, sometimes 30. And so I can't turn things around really fast. Like if you work with me, it might take 2 weeks to get a draft, but most people are okay with that, which is great. I find that when you set those boundaries up front and they're aware from the start, it's not an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what about, I guess, talking to you about the journey of motherhood, creativity, work, making a living. What have been some of the big lessons or, pieces of advice that you would give to somebody else on their journey in relation to that?
Oh gosh. I just very strongly feel that, there's only one you, there's only one me. What I need and what will work for me isn't going to work for my neighbor. It's not going to work for my in-laws. It's not going to work for my children. We really need to hone in on, I feel like there's just so many opinions on what women should be doing, but only you know what works for you. And I wish I would have understood better how to trust my gut, follow my heart, and find what's right for me. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. Do you know, it's so funny because I had somebody, Wednesdays I do sort of one-to-one coaching with people in my group. And I actually had a woman ask me, because she's trying to start a family, and she was asking about my experience of motherhood and, doing this juggle, this very thing that we're talking about. And I said to her, I said, what I wish I kind of knew earlier in relation to it is that you've got to do what feels good for you, and I would feel sometimes guilty about like, but I'm not being, I see all these mums that are like, they're doing all these things and just hanging at home with their kids all day. And sometimes I feel guilty about that, but then I'd feel this pull to want to do this other thing. And I think that's always going to be a part of who I am. And I said, if you want to just be a mum, then that's completely fine. If you want to pursue your passion, that's completely fine. But you got to just do the thing that feels good for you. And I think that I think, that thing of looking out to what other people are doing to try and sort of work out, well, what's the one thing? But I think the more that you sort of just listen and tune into what actually, like, I think we all know deep down inside, like, what is that thing that feels right for us or good for us? And anyway, so, I mean, I feel like you said a very similar kind of answer, which is, like, it's interesting to hear. So I'm going to now quickly... I've got a bunch of quick questions that I ask at the end of every interview. So I just wanted to quickly go through these. but like I said, I just wanted to get your perspective on motherhood before we wrap up. Okay, so the first one is, which 5 words best describe you?
Definitely homebody. I think creative, and I think I'm dependable, and I'm a very motivated person and loyal.
What's the best lesson learned on your life journey so far?
Oh gosh, just to be kind and not gatekeep. The amount of women who have helped me along my way, just out of pure generosity, I love to give back in that same way. I'm a big fan of not burning bridges, but building them as best I can.
Love that. What's one of your proudest achievements?
In my career?
Yeah.
I think bridging the gap into the book world has been one of my proudest ones, because a lot of people were like, no, you're a designer, you can't be an author. But I'm proud that I just did it anyway and stuck with it. So my children's books, and then also I'm just really proud of Mother Founder. I just desperately hope that it finds the women that need it, and I hope it can change some hearts and help women succeed.
What's been one of your best decisions?
I think to be self-employed. I think I would have been miserable had I stayed in the corporate 9-to-5 world.
Who inspires you?
Oh, I think at this point in my life, maybe this is cheesy, but my kids really do. They are so funny and so fun. And they're still at those ages where they are completely themselves. They don't care what the world thinks. They wear whatever they want. They say whatever they want. And I just feel like my daughter is such a little feminist. I was nothing like that as a child. And I'm just emboldened by her and the way she thinks. And I love that. I love seeing this new generation.
What are you passionate about?
Oh, so many things. But I feel like right now my main focus has been Mother Founder. I'm just really passionate about helping women succeed, helping women follow their dreams, helping women find the success in themselves and find choices for themselves.
This might tie into this next question, but I'm curious. Obviously you've created this book and it's so deeply personal to you. Do you see it becoming anything else in some capacity?
Absolutely. I'd love to we were thinking about starting a Substack, possibly a podcast. I'd love to do a volume 2 of some kind, because there are so many women. Like for our first one, we only focused on American women just because we have the same parameters. But I think it would be interesting to do it on an international level and compare women from different countries and how they make it work. So, there's lots of applications. We need to find the right opportunities and the time,
Yeah, completely. What dream do you still want to fulfill?
Oh, having this baby has been a dream. I have always wanted a 4th, and we've had miscarriages, and I thought I was done. So I'm just really excited to meet her. I keep having dreams that she's here, and then I wake up all sad that she's not yet. So I'm really excited that I get to have another kid.
Yeah. I love having 4. We've got 4 children as well. And it's just, it's been really, really wonderful. Like, I love for want of a better word, the balance. Like that.
Yeah.
It's, I have a brother, so I was one of 2, and we weren't super close as children. Some kids are very, very close, and we weren't necessarily close. Mm-hmm. And so I always wanted a sister. And like my children are fortunate that they've got both a brother and a sister. They've got 2 and 2. So yeah, I do just love that. And I always felt my mum was one of 3, and everybody was always kind of left out, or there was a bit of a, so I love the idea of 4. So anyway, that's just my little personal take on it.
I love that.
Yeah. What are you reading? What's maybe on your bedside table, on your coffee table? What are you reading at the moment?
I just got Ina Garten's memoir. And I'm really loving it. I had no idea about so much of her life. She's fascinating. I'm almost done with it, so I've been devouring it. I love it.
Fun. And what are you listening to? Do you listen to podcasts? If so, which ones do you enjoy listening to?
I do, but right now, maybe this is embarrassing to admit, I have been listening to Christmas music since November 1st. I love the holidays. So I'm just listening to a lot of Kenny Burrell and Samara Joy and Ella Fitzgerald Christmas. It's fun at our house.
Great. And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
I think same thing we touched on before, just that there's only one you, trust your gut. Happiness and success will come when you're true to yourself.
Yeah. Beautiful note to end on. Well, Amanda Jane or Amanda? Sorry, I'm so used to saying
I go by Amanda.
Yeah. I'm so
when I
used
write
to
it,
saying,
it's Amanda Jane.
Yeah. I'm so used to seeing Amanda Jane Jones. It's like you feel like that's your full, like I'm gonna be sitting at the dinner table with you saying, "Hi, Amanda Jane Jones." Thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey, some insights, about pitching and all the practical things, as well as this beautiful book. So anyone
thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. For anyone who maybe isn't familiar with your work, where's the best place for them to go check you out, maybe on social media or your website? Do you want to share some links?
Yeah, so it's just amandajanejones.com. Same for Instagram, just Amanda Jane Jones. And then all of my books and Mother Founder can be found anywhere books are sold, really. Amazon, small shops carry them. Just Google. So
yeah. We'll put some links in the show notes. So yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining me today. I really, really loved getting to know you more and having this conversation with you.
Same. Thank you. I'm so honored.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're so nice.